Hello and welcome back to ovesen.net. Today I'm taking a look at my Tiki 100 machine. That's a Norwegian machine from the 80s. Alright, so I did another video in 2019 about this machine where I did a little walkthrough of the history of the machine, and also I cleaned it and tested it. Today I'm gonna do recapping because machine from the 80s has a lot of capacitors, electrolyte capacitors, and I'm gonna replace them with the new ones. Now, this machine was produced by Tiki Data on behalf of the Norwegian government and the schools back in the 80s, almost like the same program as in the UK for the BBC machines. And if you want to know more about the details about this machine, take a look at my other video. It has 64 kilobyte of RAM, and it has a Z80 CPU. So I'm gonna open the machine, and it's quite easy, just a bunch of screws on the back side. By the way, this machine runs some kind of CPM operating system. That operating system was made by Tiki Data and was based on CPM, and thus it is compatible with CPM. Alright, I'm gonna open the machine now, and let us get to the motherboard and start desoldering the capacitors. That was the screws. Now I just turn the machine around, and this is quite heavy machinery. It's I think maybe 7 or 8 kilograms. So this is the inside. The machine has been well kept, and this is the power supply, and these are the most important capacitors that I'm gonna replace today. I'm not gonna do anything with the floppy drive, not in this video. The motherboard sits under this aluminium, or is it steel cover. This has 2 screws in the front. And now I can just lift the whole thing up like this. The motherboard has a lot of TTL components, and it has around 10 electrolyte capacitors, so I'm gonna replace these with brand new ones. So I start by removing the power supply, and it's not screwed, it's just fixed with these plastic clips. So I'm just using this plier to press it together and push them out on the other side. Alright, so now this is loose. The fan is actually soldered to the power supply board, so it has to be there. The same plastic clips goes through this plastic plate here and has to be pushed down through the PCB here as well. The fan is actually a 240 volt fan, and it is nailed to this plate, and it's not possible to remove it, so I think I'll have to desolder it just to get the power supply board free to be soldered on. So I heated up my desoldering gun here, and I'm starting to desolder the wires for the fan. I have laid out the different capacitors that I need on the power supply, and it's 8 electrolyte capacitors in this with these values: 470 microfarad, 4700, 47, 2200. The actual physical size of the capacitors are a little bit different, but I think that's okay, no problems with that. Alright, let's get starting. Just power up the desoldering station. The desoldering station is a bit noisy, as you probably can hear, but anyway, I'll start with these two, and as always, it's very important to notice the polarity of the capacitor. And as you can see, this one here has the minus sign on this side, so of course you need to replace it with a capacitor that has the minus on the same side. Also, the shortest of the two legs are always the negative side. It might be a good idea to mark the pins for the capacitor you are working on, so that you're not confused and desolder the wrong point. Alright, I start by desoldering this one. I'm not gonna show desoldering all the capacitor because it's just a repetitive work, but here goes the first, and if I'm lucky they are good, easy to get off, and otherwise I have to use my soldering iron to maybe to reflow the solder tin. Then I just wiggle the capacitor a bit and see if it's coming loose, and this one seems to be at least one of the pins are loose, so I'll just heat the other one up a bit. Okay, I think it's loose now, so I just use a bit of force. It's actually glued underneath, so that's makes it a bit harder to remove. Then it's this one, same process. Alright, that's the two first. It's the 2200 microfarad capacitors, so I'm gonna put in the new ones before I continue with the rest. But I'm gonna remove some of the glue residue before I put in the new ones. I don't think I need to put any new glue underneath the new capacitors. I think that's the overkill. So So I said this was the 4700 capacitors. Actually that's wrong. It's the first one was the 4700 and the second is the 2200. So now I just put the new ones back into place, and as you can see they are labeled plus on this side. So but don't trust the markings on a board like this. It could be wrong. Alright, that's the new ones in their holes, and try to make them straight and nice looking, because these are a little smaller. They have less width on the pins, so I don't want to push them too hard down to the board actually, because that will bend the pins too much and create strain on the pins. Then I put a little bit of flux onto the solder points to make the solder go easier. Alright, I'm ready to solder the first capacitor. Now these are very thick traces and thick pins, so I have set my soldering iron to 400 degrees, and seems to do the trick. Okay, that went smooth. I just cut off the legs, and then I can continue. And I just wipe off most of the flux, and I'm gonna clean this board with isopropanol when I'm finished with all the capacitors. Next up are these. It's the same types and sizes, and they have the negative against each other, so that's easy to remember. So they're desoldered, and I have this desoldering gun which makes it very easy to remove components. However, the one I have cost me about 120 euros from England, but you can of course use a manual pump which you can buy many places for around maybe 2-3 euros. I actually got one here, and this is a manual pump, as I said, and you just push it down, and then you use your soldering iron to heat up the solder, and then you press the button to release the vacuum and suck the solder tin into the pump. Alright, that was these. Looks fairly okay, not perfect, but they are a little loose since they're not the same size as before, but maybe I'll put some glue under. I'll see. Next up is the two 470 microfarad capacitors, the smaller ones, and these I have the exact same value and size, so that's gonna be good. The desoldering station I'm using is an Anesti ZD915, and I found this on eBay from England for yeah, I think it was around 80 euros, but with shipping and taxes and everything it came to 110, 120. But this has worked very well, so I'm pretty pleased with this one. A small tip: when I want to keep things in place, I use this rubbery thing here. It's same as the blue tack, only this is the white tack. So Then these two high voltage capacitors are gonna be next and replaced by these quite smaller ones, but they are the same specification, 47 microfarad, 350 volts. So these are on these large planes here, and they probably require quite a lot of heat, but I'll try. I have set 390 degrees. It's quite hard to to melt the solder tin here. Okay, I think that's it. Finally, on this power supply is these two X filtering capacitors. These are old type of paper capacitors, I think, and I see they are starting to break up a little bit in the plastic, so that's a sign of wear, I guess. I'm gonna replace those, but I have these plastic ones, X2. These are 0.0068 microfarad, but I only have these for 0.0047 microfarad, and I think that's gonna be okay, since these are only for filtering the AC input. I'm not a power supply or electronics expert actually, but I talked with my friend Kjell, and he says that this should be okay, so I'm gonna do that. Finally, you have this strange construction here with this two X capacitors soldered together into this wire going over here. So these are 6800 picofarad, and the closest value I have is 4700 picofarad, so I think that's gonna be okay. So I'm gonna replace them with this. So these two capacitors are soldered together with the other components in a big blob, so I just remove the whole thing. Alright, then we try to build the same. Okay, this is the same construction as original. Alright, let me solder this onto the wire, see if it works. It's not the easiest thing to do, to solder onto wires hanging in the air. Alright, that's it for all the capacitors. I'm now gonna clean the board, and then I'm gonna test it before I do the motherboard. So if something is wrong, I can diagnose this power supply and not be worried about anything on the motherboard. Okay, I have assembled the power supply and I'm ready to turn the machine on just to see if anything blows up or not. So here goes nothing. All right, well, seems to be working. Fan is spinning and the floppy drive is turning, so that's a good sign. I'm gonna attach the LCD screen now just to see if I get some video also. Alright, the computer gives out a video signal, so I guess the power to the motherboard is okay, so that's nice. I think I'll call this recapping of the power supply a success. Now continue with the motherboard. The motherboard has around 10 small capacitors, and I'm gonna recap it. So I'm gonna remove the motherboard, and it's only secured by these plastic clips. So it's just a matter of pressing in the clip and lifting the board. So I just remove the keyboard so it's not in the way. So I just pull out this flat cable here. I think that's not gonna be easy to get back into the connector, but we'll see. Alright, I think that's it. The board is loose. Quite big. Interesting detail, they just used a bit of cardboard taped to the bottom for supporting the keyboard. I guess that was the cheapest way. So there's a 9 22 microfarad and one 220 microfarad. So I got them here. Only difference is this one 220 microfarad is rated for 16 volts. The one I have is 25 volts, but that doesn't matter as long as the voltage is higher, then you're safe. I have fired up my desoldering station, and this time I think I'm gonna desolder all the capacitors in one go, and to make sure I don't mix up any polarities, I've written down the polarity of all the capacitors. On the back side of the board I have marked all the pins that I'm gonna desolder, so it's just to make sure that I'm not picking the wrong solder point. See something funny? I can make smoke rings with this. You see it? Okay, then it's time to remove them. They might be a bit stuck, but then I just have to hit the pins up again. So. So a couple of them were a little bit stubborn, so I'm just gonna heat up from this side. So this is the last one. All right, that's it. Time to solder on to the new ones. The new capacitors have a little bit different marking, and there's an arrow pointing to the negative side, so this is minus. And I try to bend the legs so that they fit into the holes, and just to make sure it looks good and not like an amateur, which I am. And I also put the markings up if I can, so it's easy to read for the next guy trying to recap this machine in 20-30 years from now. I put the board upright, standing against the shelf here, just to make it easier to push all the capacitors through the holes. Okay, this one made itself a little bit stubborn, so the hole is too small, or it's filled with solder tin, so I'm just heating up my soldering iron and fixing that. Then I stick some white tack to each of the capacitors so that they don't fall out when I turn the board, and also then I don't have to bend the legs behind, which I don't like. I like them straight when I'm soldering. Then I just double check that all the capacitors have the right polarity, and after that it's time to solder them at the back side. A little flux, of course, make it easier. Okay, time to solder. It's a bit difficult with the camera in the way, but I'll solder a few points, then I'm gonna remove the camera. All right, I think that went quite well. Okay soldering job, I hope. One last thing is this wire for the speaker. It was soldered onto to one of the legs of the capacitors and had to be desoldered, so luckily I didn't forget it. Okay, that's it. Now it's just final step is to clean off the solder flux residues after soldering. So I just use a cotton swab and some isopropanol, and then I just wipe around the pins I soldered. I already cleaned the whole board before, so it's quite clean now. And this also removes the black markings I put on before, so we don't need that anymore. So, job done. That was over 20 capacitors replaced with brand new ones, and hopefully this will keep this board living for some years to come. And as expected, this ribbon cable for the keyboard is not very easy to get because to get into the contact, because I bent the pins, so I need to try and straighten them up and get them inside. Alright, I finally managed to get them straight and into the connector, so I think that's good. Alright, recapping process is complete. It took maybe 3 hours total. And a lot of time goes into just the filming the whole process. So, alright, let's test this machine. Turning it on. Okay, it boots. So I just have a shitty video cable from the composite output, so the image is not good, but at least it's working. And since it runs a Norwegian operating system, Tiki, which is based on CPM, then the text is of course in Norwegian. Okay, it booted, so now I can type some command. Cat is the same as CAT, it's the same as a directory. And as always, I put a label inside or outside of the machine that says what I did and when. This one, recapped 04/2020. Alright, I finally assembled the machine and I'm gonna test it a bit now. And as you can see, it's quite a monster. Okay. Alright, I'm gonna leave the machine on for a while just to see that it's stable, and with that I say thank you and hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something. Thanks a lot for watching, and please subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks, bye bye.